is CNN.
The Senate Ethics Committee reprimands this man, the California Democrat Alan Cranston, for what the committee calls, quote, improper conduct.
The Michigan Board of Medicine revokes the license of Dr. Jack Kevorkian, inventor of the suicide machine. Welcome to Early Prime. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.
I'm Lou Waters. Ahead in this half hour, we'll examine the issue of sexual harassment in the U.S. military.
First, our top stories.
All right. California Democrat Alan Cranston, a 23-year veteran of the U.S. Senate, stands publicly reprimanded for what his colleagues describe as, quote, improper and repugnant conduct. The rebuke stems from Cranston's dealings with former savings and loan owner Charles Keating. Those dealings were scrutinized at length by the Senate Select Committee on Ethics. Senator Howell Heflin summarized the panel's findings and delivered its reprimand on the floor of the Senate.
Senator Cranston's improper conduct deserves the fullest, strongest, and most severe sanction which the committee has the authority to impose. Therefore, the Senate Select Committee on Ethics, on behalf of and in the name of the United States Senate, does hereby strongly and severely reprimand Senator Alan Cranston.
Cranston, who is 77 years old and stricken with prostate cancer, then went before his Senate colleagues while stressing he had violated no law and received no personal benefit from Keating's money. He said he accepted the committee's action.
In retrospect, I grant that I should not have solicited and received, even though it was on behalf of others, charitable donations close in time to official actions. That conduct came in time to reflect upon me and hence upon the Senate, this body that I love and revere. And for that, I apologize.
That response, a mix of the combative and the contrite, did not sit well with the senior Republican member of the Senate Ethics Committee.
The senator from California to rise and give a speech on this floor after accepting this admonition, this serious reprimand, a reprimand because of circumstances he knows full well, rather than a vote which I would have preferred. And blame it on campaign financing. Everybody does it. And you should all be in fear of your lives from the Ethics Committee is poppycock. I repeat, regretfully, that statement is arrogant, it is unrepentant, it is unworthy of the record of the senior senator from California.
Cranston is one of 5 senators who received large political donations from Keating while intervening with thrift regulators on behalf of his savings and loan. While the Ethics Committee criticized the other 4 lawmakers for using poor judgment, it did not recommend any further action.
The medical license of Dr. Jack Kevorkian has been revoked. Kevorkian is the euthanasia advocate who invented a so-called suicide machine. A retired pathologist, he has helped 3 chronically ill women take their lives. The unanimous action by the medical board in Michigan State does not mean there will be criminal penalties against Kevorkian. It does bar him from practicing medicine and from prescribing drugs.
A congressional investigator says medical care offered by some veterans hospitals is so bad that it can sometimes be deadly. Mary Ann Curran told a House subcommittee she found serious slip-ups at every one of the 6 VA hospitals she checked. She says the problems run the gamut from incompetence to sheer neglect.
Many of the problems we found at VA medical centers are caused by the lack of continuity of care to patients. I examined chart after chart where attending physicians rarely examined patients or did not examine them at all. Nurses allowed patients with life-threatening illnesses to languish for hours, even days, without monitoring. In one case, a patient lost a leg because he was not checked regularly.
Tomorrow, VA officials get the chance to tell their side of the story to the House committee.
The U.S. military is looking to get rid of a few good soldiers. Congress wants to give the go-ahead for the Pentagon to offer what it calls voluntary separation incentives. Big bucks for military personnel with more than 6 years service who agree to quit early. It's part of a plan to trim the ranks of the U.S. military now that the Cold War is over. Congress is expected to approve the plan sometime this week.
The Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings focused new attention on the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace, but it's an issue that one giant employer has been struggling with for years. CNN's Sharyl looks at sexual harassment in the U.S. military.
Army Specialist 4th Class Valessa Delgado says she was sexually harassed while on duty last year in Saudi Arabia.
I was hanging out my laundry. The man came up and started fondling my bras and asked if he could fondle what was in them. That was just one of the many nasty things the man said to me.
Delgado described the man as a first sergeant, one of her bosses. She says she was afraid to complain. She also says she bowed to pressure from another man, an officer in her battalion, and wrote him an erotic letter describing a fictitious sexual liaison involving the officer in a bunker during a Scud attack.
Did he seem pleased to get the letter?
Oh, yeah, he was tickled. And he showed it to everybody. He even gave a copy of it to the colonel.
One person to see the letter was Lieutenant Victoria Hudson. She says the officer, Major William Overton, tried to get her to write an erotic letter. Overton, who in civilian life is a judge in Clearwater, Florida, says it was all a joke.
Here we were in a combat zone. I was given an erotic letter that was not initiated by me, and the lieutenant says that she writes better letters for Playboy and Penthouse, and I make an off-the-cuff comment that why don't you write a letter also?
He continued to ask me about that letter. Members of the section, both superior in rank to me and subordinate in rank to me, asked me about when I was going to write the letter.
When Victoria Hudson came back to the U.S. in April of this year, she filed a complaint charging sexual harassment against Major Overton and 5 other men. She says she has not been able to hold a job since her experiences in Saudi Arabia and has trouble dealing with men. Army sources tell CNN that the initial investigation substantiated Lieutenant Hudson's complaint against Major Overton. The Army says the findings of the investigators are being reviewed. In 1990, the Army had 842 complaints of sexual harassment ranging from offensive language to physical abuse. 278 of the complaints were substantiated. The Navy had 51 complaints in 1990. 11 were substantiated. The Marine Corps, 67 complaints with 26 substantiated. Air Force, 311 complaints, 218 substantiated. Figures for Operation Desert Storm are not in yet, but the chairman of a group that advises the Pentagon on women's issues says early reports are positive.
One of the most interesting things that we found to come out of Desert Storm was the lack of horror stories and the lack of problems in that regard.
If there is any racial discrimination or sexual harassment or any other objectionable behavior of that kind, that's too much as far as we're concerned.
That is the official policy of the Pentagon, but some women's organizations are concerned that complaints may get lost at lower levels or, like Lieutenant Hudson's, drag on for months.
This matter is now in the hands of the Army. It will be their call whether these women were sexually harassed while they were in Operation Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia. Carl Rochelle, CNN, Clearwater, Florida.
A Navy admiral is apologizing for a newsletter containing jokes about women. The publication included a series of snippets about why beer is better than women. A female employee complained, saying she found the jokes offensive. Vice Admiral Jerry Tuttle says he's sorry if he offended any readers. The newsletter focuses on technology and is sent to hundreds of Navy officers.
Coming up on this edition of Early Prime, hope in the wake of this week's double hostage release. Will other Westerners soon be free?
In search of the gift of giving, have hard times dim the holiday spirit?
And later on our program, helping your child get a leg up on financial literacy.
Plus, boxing up musical memories from Crosby, Stills, and Nash. All ahead.
CNN's Early Prime, news and information for people in the prime of life.
In Switzerland, Ricola has been soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally for over 60 years. Ricola is a blend of 10 organically grown alpine herbs and natural flavors, providing pleasant-tasting natural relief. Ricola, the natural choice for soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally.
Tonight, will Magic Johnson's tragedy save other professional athletes from the perils of promiscuity? Tonight, Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
America, America.